So you're too broke to hire a real lawyer?
Zuri Voss laughed. Right there, in the middle of a federal courtroom. Loud enough for the whole gallery to hear. She stood at the defense table in a designer coat that cost more than Khalil's truck. Diamonds catching the fluorescent light. And she looked at her husband, at his worn briefcase, his yellow legal notebook, the empty chair beside him where a legal team should have been. And she laughed like he was the funniest thing she'd seen all year.
You don't even deserve to sit at the same table as me. God, this is pathetic.
The gallery snickered. Her attorney smirked. Even the judge exhaled like he'd already written the ending.
All right, that's quite enough.
Khalil didn't move, didn't flinch. His hands rested flat on the table. Still, deliberate. The stillness of a man who has been carrying something very heavy and is finally about to set it down.
Your Honor, before we begin the divorce proceedings,
I'd like to address the $52 million concealed inside the Evergreen Legacy Trust.
The laughter stopped. Just like that. Gone. Like someone had cut the power to the room. Zuri's smile didn't fade. It collapsed. Every diamond still caught the light. But the woman wearing them had gone somewhere else entirely. Because Khalil had been silent for 14 months. And in those 14 months, while everyone around him assumed he was nothing, he had been building something no one in that courtroom could have prepared for. What he places on that evidence table in the next 60 seconds doesn't just end a marriage. It changes the lives of over 800 people who never even knew his name. But to understand what he put on that table, you need to know what he found alone in a cold basement 14 months ago, and what he chose to do next. Khalil Thorne was 34 years old, and he believed, truly, deeply believed, that a man's word was the only currency that never lost its value. He wasn't rich, never pretended to be. He drove a '09 Chevy Tahoe with a cracked dashboard and managed construction projects on Chicago's South Side in worn suits that had seen better decades. But he was honest, he was loyal, and he had spent 4 years giving everything he had to a woman who was quietly, methodically, planning to take everything he was worth. Then one February morning, he found the documents. Not hidden in some secret drawer, not locked behind a password. Sitting right there on the synchronized cloud backup server in his own basement, the one his wife had asked him to install because it would make household life more convenient. $52 million. Hidden inside something called the Evergreen Legacy Trust. Her name, offshore account numbers, and an email she had sent to herself. Clean the books. Move the funds before the divorce becomes public. Khalil sat on that cold basement floor for a very long time. He didn't cry. Not yet. He just read the same words over and over until they stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a map. Because here is what nobody in that courtroom knew. What nobody would know for another 14 months. Khalil Thorne had already decided he wasn't going to hire an attorney, call anyone, or say a single word to a single soul. He was going to prepare, in silence, and wait. Before we get into this story, if you've ever watched someone you loved completely underestimate you, stay with us. Because what happens inside courtroom 7B at the Cook County Courthouse on a cold Chicago morning is something you will not forget. Chicago in February doesn't apologize for itself. The wind off Lake Michigan comes hard and personal. The sky sits low and gray over the south side, and the bare trees along South Michigan Avenue look like they've been waiting patiently for something that keeps not arriving. Khalil arrived at the Daily Center on West Washington Street at 7:45, 45 minutes before the doors to courtroom 7B even opened. He sat on a wooden bench with a yellow legal notebook on his knee and a paper cup of gas station coffee going cold in his hand. He had spilled a little on his cuff, pulling it from the cup holder, same as always. His grandmother used to spill coffee on her recipe cards every Sunday before church potluck and just laugh it off. "The good Lord knows what I meant to write," she would say. Khalil didn't laugh this morning. He reviewed his notes one final time, organized, tabbed, color-coded in a way that would have impressed any second-year law student. He had spent 14 months studying Illinois divorce law, federal embezzlement statutes, and financial fraud case precedents, mostly between 10 at night and 3 in the morning, on a folding table in that same basement where he first found the files. At 8:15, he walked into the courtroom. The room smelled like old wood and air conditioning that hadn't been serviced since the Clinton administration. A court officer stood by the door with the expression of a man who had seen too many people at their worst and had long stopped being surprised. Khalil set his worn leather briefcase beside the plaintiff's table, placed his notebook on top, sat down, waited. At 8:47, his wife arrived. Zuri Voss entered the way she entered every room, like the room should feel grateful. Designer coat, silk blouse, hair immaculate, diamonds catching the fluorescent light. Her attorney, Tyrone Cross, walked half a step behind her. 45 years old, expensive suit, the confidence of a man who had never once expected to lose. Zuri glanced at the plaintiff's table, at Khalil's yellow notebook, at his frayed briefcase, at the empty space beside him where a legal team should have been. Then she laughed. Not a quiet laugh. A full, open, theatrical laugh designed to be heard by everyone. "So you're too broke to hire a real lawyer, Khalil," she said. "You don't even deserve to sit at the same table as me. God, this is pathetic." Laughter rippled through the gallery. Tyrone Cross smirked. Even Judge Isaiah Brooks exhaled with visible impatience, his expression carrying the weariness of a man who had already decided how this was going to go. Khalil's hands trembled slightly against the table. Not from fear, from the tension that builds in a person who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and is finally about to set it down. He inhaled slowly, lifted his head. "Your Honor," he said, "before we begin the divorce proceedings, I would like to address the $52 million concealed inside the Evergreen Legacy Trust." Zuri's smile disappeared. The courtroom went dead silent. They laughed at him because they thought he was just another man being humiliated by a powerful woman. But in less than 60 seconds, every person in that courtroom would realize they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. Stay with us, because what Khalil reveals next doesn't just change his future. It changes the futures of more than 800 people who never even knew his name. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then Tyrone Cross was on his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a fishing expedition. My client categorically denies the existence of any such trust." "Mr. Thorne," Judge Brooks said, cutting through him, "can you substantiate this?" "Yes, sir." Khalil reached into his briefcase and began placing documents across the evidence table. Wire transfer records, account statements, incorporation filings, and a complete transaction history for the Evergreen Legacy Trust. $52 million. Never reported to the court. never filed with the IRS. Zuri scoffed. "This is fiction. Did you hack my computer?" "You asked me to install the family cloud sync system," Khalil said calmly. "Every company file on any device connected to our home network automatically backed up to the basement server. I have the text message where you made that request." He slid it forward. Psychologists call what Zuri did in that moment DARVO: deny, attack, reverse, victim, and defender. When someone is caught and immediately pivots to accusing the other person, that is not an innocent reaction. It is a defense mechanism designed to make the truth teller doubt themselves. Most people falter when hit with that reversal. They get defensive, and the moment they get defensive, they lose the high ground. Khalil didn't falter, because he had learned something fundamental over 14 months. The truth does not need to defend itself. It only needs to be presented clearly. Judge Brooks leaned forward. The weary impatience from earlier was replaced by careful attention. He picked up the wire transfer records and read slowly. In the gallery, people who had been checking their phones now sat completely still. What the courtroom couldn't see was the darkness behind those documents. Khalil had found the first files on a Tuesday night in December, just after midnight. The basement server light was blinking oddly. On instinct, he sat down and opened the backup folders. What he found kept him on that concrete floor until the winter sun came pale through the small basement window. 5 hours later, coffee cold, the rest of the house still asleep above him. The weeks that followed were the heaviest of his life. His depression returned with particular cruelty, because this time the pain had a face, a voice he had once loved. One Thursday night in January, Khalil drove to the parking structure near the John Hancock Center and sat on the rooftop level for 40 minutes, staring at the city lights below. He did not get out of the car. What stopped him was his grandfather. Not a vision, just a memory. Marcus Thorne coming home from a 12-hour Southside construction shift in February cold, boots muddy, moving quietly to the kitchen to start dinner. Never announcing his strength, simply living it. Khalil drove home, and instead of collapsing, he started preparing. This is the most important lesson in this story. Psychologists describe 2 responses to discovering you've been betrayed: reactive explosion, confrontation, public accusation, immediate release, or strategic withdrawal, absorbing the pain privately and redirecting that energy into careful preparation. Reactive explosion feels more powerful. Strategic withdrawal is what actually wins. Khalil chose silence, not from weakness, but because he understood that a courtroom would be a far more powerful place to speak the truth than any hallway argument ever could be. The people who laughed that morning had mistaken stillness for emptiness. They were about to discover what stillness actually means. Back in the courtroom, Khalil turned to the next layer. Over 18 months, nearly $4 million had been siphoned from the retirement accounts of more than 800 Voss Dynamics employees, most of them black warehouse workers and long-haul truck drivers who had given the company years of their lives. The transfers were broken into fragments, timed to avoid triggering regulatory review. The gallery went quiet in a heavy, unsettling way. Not outrage, but the sound of people absorbing something that genuinely shook them. Zuri pressed her palm flat against the defense table. "He accessed private company records without authorization." Khalil slid the next document forward without a word. An internal email, sent by Zuri to herself through the home network backup. "Clean the books. Move the funds before the divorce becomes public." 7 words, casual as a grocery list. More devastating than anything a hired legal team could have built. In the third row, Nia Washington, 29 years old, warehouse employee, pressed both hands over her mouth. The tears came so fast, she looked almost startled. "Our retirement money," she whispered. "She took all of it?" 2 rows back, a driver with 11 years at the company shook his head slowly and said nothing. Tyrone Cross objected 5 times in 4 minutes. Judge Brooks overruled him every single time. There is a term for what Zuri did to those workers: asymmetric trust exploitation. The abuse of a power structure where one party controls all information while the other has nothing but faith. The employees showed up. They did their work. They had no way of knowing the person managing their futures had already decided their futures didn't matter. This is why Khalil's choice to document and expose was not revenge. It was protection. For himself and for 800 people who never knew he was quietly fighting for them too. The room had transformed completely. 40 minutes earlier, Khalil had been the punchline. Now people regarded him with the quiet, stunned respect reserved for someone who has been patiently right for a very long time. Khalil let the silence settle. Then he turned toward Zuri. "But the most serious part," he said quietly, "hasn't even come out yet." Zuri's composure cracked. Her fingers pressed into the table until the tips went pale. A bead of perspiration traced down her face despite the freezing air conditioning. And the confidence she had carried into this room like a second designer coat was finally, visibly, coming apart. Khalil knew everything and stayed completely silent for 14 months. One word in the comments, explode or prepare. Which would you have chosen? And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, drop your story below. You are not alone. What Khalil places on that evidence table next will stun every person in the courtroom and permanently change the lives of 800 working families. Keep listening. Khalil reached into the briefcase one final time. 3 photographs, a flash drive connected to the court's projector. The screen filled. Flight records. A private jet booked through a Cayman Islands Shell LLC, departing O'Hare, bound for Dubai. 48 hours from now. Wire transfer confirmations. $3.2 million moved to a UAE account in the past 72 hours. Surveillance photographs taken 2 evenings prior at the Waldorf Astoria parking garage on North Michigan Avenue. 4 Louis Vuitton suitcases loaded into a black Escalade. 1 photograph angled to show the contents clearly. Cash. Bundled. Packed with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this before. The gallery went still. Not outrage. Something heavier. The silence of people who have stopped being surprised and started understanding the full weight of what they are watching. Judge Brooks stared at the screen, then set down his pen. "Mr. Thorne, are you representing to this court that Ms. Voss was preparing to leave the jurisdiction permanently?" "Yes, Your Honor. Evidence obtained legally through a licensed investigator and through documents already entered into the record." Brooks turned to the defense table. Tyrone Cross was on his feet, pivoting, objecting, searching for the angle that might slow this down. The smooth certainty from earlier had thinned noticeably. "Your Honor, these photographs are entirely circumstantial." "Mr. Cross, sit down." He sat. The judge looked at Khalil, and for those watching carefully, his expression had moved past professional attention into something quieter and more considered. "Bailiff, contact the U.S. Marshal's Office and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Effective immediately." He turned to the room. "Ms. Voss is to surrender her passport before leaving this building." All assets connected to Voss Dynamics Logistics are temporarily frozen, pending federal review. Emergency operational control of the company is transferred to Mr. Khalil Thorne to protect employee assets and preserve evidence during investigation. One strike of the gavel. Clean. Final. Zuri didn't move. Then, very quietly, "Khalil, you can't do this to me." Not the loud theatrical voice from that morning. Something small, stripped, frightened. He looked at her steadily and said nothing, because the woman across from him now bore almost no resemblance to his wife, who had entered this room laughing 2 hours earlier. The jewelry still caught the light, but everything underneath, the certainty, the belief that she was beyond consequence, had collapsed completely. Psychologists call this the collapse of the false self. A person who has built their identity entirely around power and control has no interior architecture to fall back on when that structure is removed. It doesn't unravel gradually. It falls all at once. What the courtroom saw in Zuri was exactly that. Not a strong woman brought low by hard circumstances, but a constructed image losing the conditions that had always held it up. What they saw in Khalil was the opposite. A man whose dignity had never required external validation to exist. The court recessed. When Judge Brooks returned, the divorce was granted on expedited terms. Khalil received temporary authority over Voss Dynamics to protect employees during the federal investigation, not as a financial reward, but as a protective measure. The gallery broke into applause. It started hesitantly, then spread. Workers who had been sitting in the back rows for hours were suddenly on their feet. Some were crying, some laughing in the disbelieving way people laugh when something they feared would never happen finally does. Nia Washington pushed through the crowd the moment security allowed it. She wrapped both arms around Khalil and set it into the worn fabric of his jacket. "You saved us. Thank you. Thank you so much." Khalil held her. Not like a victor accepting gratitude, like an exhausted man who hadn't yet found words for what he was feeling and wasn't going to try. For about 30 seconds, he allowed himself to believe it was over. That night, Khalil drove south along King Drive as the city settled into cold evening quiet. He parked in front of the family home on East 63rd Street in Woodlawn, the 2-story brick house his grandfather bought in 1987. The third porch step still had the same creak it had carried since Khalil was 7. Some things don't change, and you stop noticing them until one night you are 34 and exhausted, and you need them to be exactly where they have always been. He walked through the house and out the back door. The oak tree filled the back corner, massive, permanent, indifferent to everything that had happened beneath it over the decades. Khalil sat at its base. The cold pressed through his jacket. And for the first time in 14 months, he broke down completely. Not managed emotion, real grief. The kind that takes over without asking permission. He buried his face in his hands and stayed there. Not because of the money, not because of the victory, because he had loved his wife. Not the performance of love. He had loved Zuri the way a person rearranges themselves around another human being without realizing they're doing it. Completely, without reservation. Every memory now felt like a document he had been reading wrong for years. The dinners, the quiet mornings, the nights she reached for his hand in the car and he had thought, "This is real. This is something I don't have to be afraid of." And beneath all that grief was a wound even quieter. The humiliation of realizing he had ignored every warning sign, not because he was naive, but because he had wanted desperately to believe he was worthy of being chosen. Under the oak tree, in the cold Chicago dark, Khalil allowed himself to grieve. Not just the marriage, the version of himself who had believed loyalty alone could keep a heart safe. But what federal investigators discover the following morning makes everything that happened in that courtroom look like the opening chapter, not the conclusion. The FBI search team arrived at the Voss estate in Kenilworth at 7:15 the following morning. The house sat far back from the road. High ceilings, decorator-chosen artwork, rooms designed to project a life rather than actually contain one. Agents moved methodically through every space, boxing records and drives with the thoroughness of people given a wide warrant and intending to use it fully. A junior agent found it. In Zuri's private office, a room always kept locked during the years Khalil lived there, a boundary he had respected without question. A recessed safe sat behind a framed painting. Blues and grays. Expensive. Means. The combination was in the documents they'd already seized. Inside, financial records and a manila folder held with a rubber band. The files were dated 2018, 2 full years before the marriage. The contents were read into record the following afternoon at a supplementary hearing, called so quickly that latecomers stood in the corridor because the gallery was full. Khalil sat at the same plaintiff's table. Same notebook, same briefcase. Very still. The stillness of a man who had sensed what was coming since early that morning. An FBI financial analyst read without editorializing, in the flat voice of someone trained to let facts speak for themselves. In 2018, Zuri had identified the Thorne family property on Chicago's South Side as an acquisition target. Urban redevelopment along the Woodlawn corridor had made certain parcels near East 63rd Street highly valuable. The Thorne property, inherited by Khalil from his grandfather, was appraised at nearly $18 million. The blueprint outlined, step by step, how to gain access to that property. Through marriage. One handwritten note, blue ink, neat cursive, ordinary lined paper, read, "Khalil is trusting. He'll sign anything once we're married." The courtroom went completely silent. Khalil stared at that sentence on the projection screen. He had read it the night before. The FBI had provided a summary at 11 o'clock in the quiet kitchen on East 63rd Street. But hearing it spoken aloud in a room full of witnesses was different. Because what it meant, what it had always meant, was that his wife had never seen him as a partner. She had assessed him, identified his trusting nature not as something to honor, but as a vulnerability to use. Every soft moment, every time she had looked at him like he was the only person in a room, all of it had been a calculated component of a plan that existed before she ever spoke his name. Even the love had been engineered. He had never been chosen. He had been targeted. Psychologists call this a long con emotional manipulation, one of the most damaging forms of betrayal a person can experience, because it doesn't just wound the present, it retroactively poisons every positive memory. The victim loses not only the relationship, but their trust in their own perception of the past. This is why what Khalil felt under the oak tree the night before was not weakness. It was the rational response of a person absorbing one of the most profound psychological injuries a human being can sustain, and still choosing, in the morning, to get up. Then came the second document, the same flat voice, same measured delivery. Financial records showed that Darnell Thorne, 58 years old, Khalil's uncle, present at every Thanksgiving table and Sunday dinner Khalil had ever known, had received 2 wire transfers from an LLC connected to Zuri Voss. $800,000. Then $1.2 million more 14 months later. $2 million total. In exchange for what the documents made explicit. Introducing Khalil to Zuri. Vouching for her character to every skeptical family member. Helping navigate the Thorne estate paperwork after Marcus passed. And privately telling Khalil, weeks before the wedding, "Marry her, son. She's good for you. She'll help stabilize your future." Khalil heard those words again as the analyst read them. He turned slowly and looked at his uncle. Darnell sat in the 4th row in the gray suit he wore to church. He was a large man who had always carried himself with ease. Today, he looked at the floor, the wall, his own hands, anywhere but Khalil. Khalil held his gaze on him for a long moment, then looked away, not in forgiveness, not yet, but with the exhaustion of a man who has run out of energy to be surprised by what people do when greed gets its hands on them. Blood betrayal is its own category of wound. It doesn't just damage the present, it reaches back into childhood and reframes years of memory. It forces a person to rebuild their understanding of where they stand in the world from scratch. Khalil had lost a marriage and discovered it had been a transaction. Now he had lost an uncle and discovered that too had been arranged. He sat with that weight and stayed upright. The arrest warrant arrived at 11:47. 2 federal agents entered through the side door. The lead agent read the charges clearly. Financial fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, tax evasion, obstruction of justice. Tyrone Cross rose immediately. "My client will cooperate fully. Mr. Cross, step aside." He stepped aside. Zuri stood from her chair, and what happened next was not what the room expected. She didn't compose herself. She didn't perform a final dignity. She crumbled, sank to her knees in front of the defense table, her face stripped of every layer she had spent years constructing. "Khalil, please. You loved me once. Don't let them take me. We can still fix this." He looked down at her quietly. "I did love you," he said. Every word of it was real. A pause. "Now I only pity you, and pity myself, for being unable to see what was right in front of me." As agents guided her toward the exit, the sound she made filled the courtroom. Nothing like the woman who had entered it laughing, and then faded as the doors swung shut. No one moved. No one spoke. Because everyone present understood they had not merely witnessed the end of a marriage. They had witnessed the complete collapse of greed and carefully constructed deception, brought down by one quiet man with a yellow legal notebook and 14 months of patient preparation. What Khalil chooses to do with that power, now that he holds it, is the part of this story that will change how you think about what real strength looks like. 3 days after Zuri Voss was escorted out of courtroom 7B, Khalil Thorne walked into the main warehouse facility of Voss Dynamics Logistics on West Pershing Road on Chicago's South Side. It was a Tuesday morning, cold and brilliant, the kind of Chicago winter day that is so clear and bright it seems almost apologetic about the temperature. The loading dock doors stood open at one end of the building, and pale morning light fell across the concrete floor in long, steady rectangles. The space smelled like motor oil and cardboard, and the particular human warmth of a large indoor place where a lot of people spend a lot of their days. More than 800 employees had been asked to gather. They filled the warehouse in clusters, standing near equipment, sitting on folding chairs and supply crates, leaning against forklifts with arms crossed and faces that carried every version of the past several days. fear, quiet anger, cautious, fragile hope. The collective expression of people who have been through something and are not yet certain what it means for them. Khalil walked to the front of the room alone. He wasn't wearing anything new. Same suit. The tie was slightly better, not frayed. He stepped to the portable microphone on the folding table, looked out at the room for a long moment, and bowed his head slightly. "I owe all of you an apology," he said. The room was quiet. A few people shifted in surprise. "I allowed someone I trusted to manage this company without the scrutiny it deserved," Khalil continued. His voice was steady and unrehearsed. "I believed what I was told. I did not look as carefully as I had the ability to look. And because of that, 800 people who came to work every day, who trusted this company with their futures, had those futures put at serious risk." He paused. "I cannot undo that. I want to be honest with you about that. There is no way to erase it. But I can make a promise, and I do not make promises I don't intend to keep." He looked across the room, past the front rows, past the middle, all the way to the people standing near the loading dock at the far end. "Every retirement dollar taken from you will be returned, with interest. That process begins this week under federal oversight, and it will be completed. Every account, every single person in this room." A sound moved through the warehouse. Not applause yet, something quieter and more fundamental. The sound of hundreds of people releasing breath they had been holding for a very long time. "And going forward," Khalil said, "the people who built this company, workers who were underpaid, overlooked, and treated as though they were replaceable, will be treated with fairness and dignity. Not because the law requires it, because it is right." Nia Washington stood up from the front row. She had been at this facility since before dawn, meeting with the federal liaison and the employee advocacy committee and the outside accounting firm, filling a spiral notebook with careful notes, drinking bad coffee from the break room machine without complaint. Because she was 29 years old, these were her people, and she was not going to sit down while something still needed doing. She was standing now because she couldn't not stand. Her voice shook when she found it. "You didn't just save our money," she said. "You saved our dignity and our hope. A lot of us had stopped believing that anyone was actually going to fight for us." She stopped, pressed her lips together, let the emotion come rather than fight it. "Thank you," she said simply. The applause that followed was not polite and not performative. It was the sound of 800 people deciding together in the same moment that something had genuinely changed. It filled the warehouse and bounced off the high ceiling and the concrete walls and the dock light pouring through the open doors. Khalil stood at the microphone and let it wash over him. He did not look triumphant. He looked like a man working hard to receive something real. There is a principle in organizational psychology, sometimes called restorative leadership. The idea that genuine authority is not demonstrated by the accumulation of power, but by the willingness to use power in service of the people most harmed by its misuse. Anyone can take what a legal settlement allows. Very few choose instead to ask, who was hurt, and what do they actually need? Khalil's decision to stand in that warehouse and apologize before he announced anything else was not a strategic calculation. It was a reflection of character that had been formed long before any of this began. On a construction site on the south side, watching a grandfather who never needed to explain his values because he lived them plainly every single day. The federal case proceeded efficiently. 6 months later, Zuri Voss was sentenced in the Northern District of Illinois to 9 to 12 years on charges of financial fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. Judge Brooks presided. He read the sentence in the same steady voice he brought to everything. And when Zuri turned briefly toward the gallery before being escorted from the courtroom, there was no one there who met her eyes with anything resembling sympathy. Darnell Thorne pled guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy and 1 count of wire fraud. His sentencing came separately. Khalil did not attend. The Thorne family property on East 63rd Street was returned to Khalil through the divorce settlement. Clear title, unencumbered, exactly as his grandfather had held it. As for Voss Dynamics itself, the assets, the leverage, the considerable financial authority the courts had placed temporarily in Khalil's hands, he did something that surprised nearly everyone still watching. He took only what was necessary to stabilize and restructure the company. Enough to protect the employees, fund the retirement restoration, and keep the business operating. Then, he stopped. He did not maximize. He did not claim what the law would have permitted him to claim. The remaining recoverable resources were redirected into a new nonprofit, the Thorne Legacy Foundation, named for his grandfather, built around a single clear mission: free legal and financial assistance for victims of economic abuse in marriage, with a specific focus on underserved communities across Chicago and the surrounding region. At the foundation's public opening ceremony on a Saturday afternoon at a community center on South Michigan Avenue, a reporter raised her hand and asked the question the whole room was thinking. "Mr. Thorne, after everything you went through, do you feel that justice was truly served? Do you feel victorious?" Khalil stood at the podium for a moment without answering. He thought about a courtroom, a designer coat, the sound of a woman laughing at a man with a yellow legal notebook. He thought about his grandfather coming home muddy and tired and silent and strong. A small, sad smile crossed his face. "The poorest person in that courtroom," he said quietly, "was the one who lost everything that truly mattered, all at once. Money, honor, conscience." The room went still, because everyone in it understood he was right. There is one final scene in this story, one quiet moment beneath an oak tree at the end of a long afternoon. And it is the one that will stay with you long after everything else fades. Several weeks after the foundation's opening, on a Saturday evening in late March, the temperature climbed above 40 degrees on Chicago's south side for the first time all year. It is a particular kind of Chicago evening, the ones that arrive in early spring after the winter has finally exhausted itself, and something warmer starts pushing through the edges of things. The light goes golden an hour before sunset. The air still carries a little sharpness, but it is the kind of sharpness that feels like a reminder rather than a threat. Old trees on East 63rd Street begin to show the first faint suggestions of green at the very tips of their branches, barely visible, tentative, the way hope almost always arrives, quietly, at the margins, before anyone is quite ready to trust it. Khalil walked through the house alone. Kitchen, living room, the back bedroom where his grandfather had kept tools in a green metal box with a broken latch he never bothered to fix because it still worked fine. Out the back door. He stood on the porch for a moment and looked at the yard. The oak tree filled most of the back corner, massive, unmovable, wholly indifferent to everything that had happened to the family beneath it over the decades. It had been pressed into the ground as a sapling. Now it would outlast everyone who had ever stood in its shade. That thought had once seemed melancholy. Tonight, it didn't. Khalil walked across the grass, still soft from recent rains, and sat at the base of the tree. He held the final court order in both hands, the document that formally closed the divorce proceedings and restored clear title to the Thorne property. He had been carrying it for several days without being able to put it away, the way a person carries certain things before they are genuinely ready to file them permanently in the past. He placed it carefully against the bark of the tree, beside the small, flat grave marker his family had set there for Marcus Thorne. A modest stone, his name, the years of his life, and the words engraved in simple letters, "Faithful until the end." Khalil sat with it for a while. The evening light moved through the oak branches above him in slow, shifting patterns. A cardinal landed briefly on a low branch to his left, stayed a moment, and left. Somewhere down the street, a screen door opened and closed. A child's voice, distant and cheerful, called something that got carried off by the breeze before it could be understood. After a while, Khalil spoke, low, unhurried, in the voice of a man speaking to someone who already knows the whole story. "Grandpa." He looked at the grave marker. "I protected our legacy." A pause. "And I protected my dignity." He sat with that for a long moment. Then he looked up, past the tree, past the yard, the way a person looks when they are trying to reach something larger than what is directly in front of them. "If you have ever been looked down on," he said quietly, "because you do not have enough money, or because of the color of your skin, or because of the neighborhood you came from, or because of a name that carries no weight in the rooms you are trying to walk into, do not waste your energy demanding validation from people who have already decided what they think you are worth." The wind moved through the oak leaves. Slow, steady. The sound that makes a backyard feel like the most private place in the world. Stay quiet. Learn what you need to learn. Prepare carefully, in the dark, when no one is watching, and rise when the time is right. He paused. A person's true value is never measured by the size of an account balance, or the label on a coat, or the address on a tax return. It is measured by the strength of their character when that character costs something to keep, and by the capacity to forgive, not because the person who caused the harm deserves it, but because carrying that weight indefinitely means carrying something that belongs to someone else for the rest of your life. His eyes dropped briefly toward the grave marker. Betrayal from family cuts in a way that other wounds do not. I understand that now in a way I did not before. But sometimes those wounds, the ones that come from the people you loved without condition, teach you things about your own endurance that you never could have learned any other way. They show you exactly how much you can carry and still choose to stand up. He looked back up. The golden light of late afternoon touched his face. The same steady face that had been laughed at in a courtroom not so many months ago. The same man, changed in the places that matter, not harder, not closed off, quieter, more certain. The way a tree is more certain of itself after surviving a difficult winter. "Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely?" he said. "Have you ever been in a room where someone dismissed you before you opened your mouth, based on what you had, or what you wore, or where you were from? If you have, I want you to know something." He paused. Their measure of your worth was never the truth. It was only ever a reflection of what they were afraid of finding in you. A final pause. The wind moved again. Share your story below. Tell us what you went through and what you chose to do. Because healing does not happen in isolation. It happens when honest people tell true things to each other. And maybe, Somewhere in that conversation, we help each other find the strength to stand back up. Khalil sat quietly as the last light faded over the south side. Steady, at peace, hopeful in the quiet, durable way of people who have been through something real and come through the other side with their characters still intact. This story teaches us 3 things worth writing down. Not on a sticky note you'll lose, but in the back of a real notebook you keep in the kitchen drawer. First, when someone repeatedly dismisses what you bring to the table, that is not an honest assessment of your value. It is a strategy to keep you from noticing theirs. Khalil never doubted his worth because one loud woman laughed at him. Neither should you, or the sons and grandsons you love. Second, documentation is dignity. Khalil saved every text message, every receipt, every email. If you are ever in a situation, a financial dispute, a contested inheritance, a family disagreement over property, write the date, write what was said, keep the paper. A quiet paper trail has more power in a courtroom than the loudest argument ever will. Third, the most dangerous form of theft is not the kind that empties a bank account. It is the kind that empties a person's belief in their own judgment. If someone in your life, a spouse, a family member, anyone, has spent years telling you that your instincts are wrong, your concerns are small, and your trust is naive, your instincts were probably right all along. Khalil's grandfather never needed a courtroom. He just lived correctly every single day. That was always the whole lesson. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. These narratives were crafted by real individuals who care deeply about truth and fairness. AI helped organize and enhance readability, ensuring the powerful takeaways about kindness, accountability, and human resilience reach and impact audiences worldwide. Production team. Story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.